Hi, welcome to Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis. Thanks so much for joining me today. This is the show that takes you on a deep dive on what's happening in and around the hospitality industry. So if you're here for the first time or you're back again, welcome. Here I am in the gorgeous Wine Lair, the private wine club right next to the Ritz-Carlton in downtown DC. If you haven't had a chance to check out this place, I highly recommend it. You can look at some previous episodes which were filmed in the wine cellar. It is chilly, but so cool because so many of the members here keep all their wine, and it's so great to sort of like window shop at all the fabulous wines and spirits that are kept in the lockers. Also, they have a wonderful chef here, and I don't know if you've heard the news, but private clubs are kind of the thing, and Wine Lair is at the forefront of it, and I'm so grateful that they sponsor this show and we get to do it here every week. So a little bit about me. If you don't know, I've been covering the DC food and wine and hospitality scene for the last 20 years. The listarewantit.com, the online e-zine that tells you about absolutely everything happening in the DC metro area, and sometimes Richmond, and Baltimore. And you follow me at NYCCI, Nellis, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You hear me on WTOP. You also hear me every Sunday on Foodie and the Beast, the only food and wine variety show that I do with my husband, David. It's been on air for 14 years. We're getting ready to celebrate 15 years on air. What else do I do? Oh, I judge a lot. I'm really judgy. And I MC a lot. I do a really good job of that. And coming up for the James Beard Awards, Hilton has hired me to do their red carpet. So stay tuned for all the fun on that one. Okay, so if you pay attention to my Insta feed, you know that I'm out and about and I eat and drink an awful lot. So just a quick wrap up of where I've been recently. Some of these places you so definitely need a reservation at, and it's going to take some time because they're popular and there's a reason for it. So I went to the new Kappo on MacArthur Boulevard. Ari Wilder, Adrian Williams, and Chef Minoru Ogawa. It is a 8-course omakase tasting. It is a little jewel box in the former Makoto space. It's unlike anything at the city at this moment. I know a lot of people are using the term omakase, and they are omakase experiences. Omakase usually means at the whim of the chef. It is a Japanese experience, but this is heavy on the wagyu and also heavy on the seafood, and it's just pristine. It's pricey, fair warning. Wine list is fabulous, obviously, thanks to Ari Wilder. Corey, let me get his last name right. Corey Lindolt is doing the cocktails. Most of you know I'm not a huge cocktail fan, but he is doing a wagyu washed old-fashioned called the Bully, and it's so clean, it's so good. It's going to get you drunk, so be careful. It's very delicious. But anyway, reservations necessary. They do make you stand outside because there's literally no place to go. The restaurant's so tiny. So 5 minutes before your reservation or seating, they let you in, and then you're there for this 2-hour experience. Get on board. It's worth it. I went hiking because I love to hike. I was out at Sky Meadows in Lost Mountain, and I love going out to that area because there's so many great wineries. So you get a really good 4 or 5 mile hike in, and then you go to a great winery. We went to check out Crimson Lane Vineyards, brand new, super beautiful. That team is coming in shortly to talk about what they're doing out there. The wines are young. Obviously, it's a brand new vineyard, but I'm very excited for what it's going to be. We also, since we were out there, went to Patty O's, Chef Patrick O'Connell's little cafe right next door to the Inn at Little Washington. Not Inn at Little Washington dining, but oh my God, so yummy. This is casual food. This is Patrick O'Connell's version of casual food, talking like champagne washed hams and delicious pastrami and a fabulous bakery. They do not take reservations except for brunch, but if you're going to take a day trip out to that part of Virginia, I highly recommend stopping there for lunch. And lastly, I want to tell you about a show that's going on at the Shakesphere Theatre right now. Not food, but a very important, powerful program called Here There Are Blueberries. It sort of goes with what we're talking about today. Here There Are Blueberries is a story about the Holocaust Museum when they are presented with a photo album of the guards at Auschwitz and how well and happily they lived. And it's a real conversation about what people know and how they behave when atrocities are not happening to them. It's a fantastic show, and it will be here for a little bit. And if you have the opportunity to see it, I highly, highly recommend it. Really one of the most powerful shows I've seen in quite some time. Okay, so that brings us to today's show. So those of you who pay attention know that back in the fall, I was blessed by being asked to interview Michael Twitty, Kosher Soul King, who I adore, at the Capitol Jewish Museum, which is opening soon. They had a huge food and wine festival in the fall. During that interview, I got introduced to LaNitra Berger, who then introduced me to Lauren Strauss. They co-teach a class on Judaism and the Black diaspora and how the two commingle. I brought them here. Hopefully you saw the show. And we really talked about how the two cultures and cuisines come together. Fast forward to today. Today's show, I have Ari Augenbaum and Nar Hovnanian. You say it so much prettier than I do.
I've had years of practice.
Okay. They are of Still Deciding, LLC, which I love the name. But Ari is the executive chef. Nana is one of the founders, and Nar is one of the founders, and they have multiple concepts in Richmond. They have Soul Taco Restaurant, they have Sear Burger, but the real reason why I brought them here today is to talk about their concept called JewFro Restaurant. So, hi you both. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm really excited to be here.
So, I want to talk to you both a little bit. Let's start with your backgrounds. Nar, let's start with you. How did you get into the biz?
Very accidentally, actually. So I am originally from Southern California, born and raised in Orange County, went to UCI, moved the second that I could because Orange County was not cool as a 22-year-old girl.
Okay.
Moved to DC because I had done an internship on the Hill and kind of fell in love with the city and the East Coast. Got into event production, all the while very interested in food.
Well, event production and food.
Yeah, very,
together.
I mean, hospitality, you know.
Right.
Totally makes sense with one another. Met Ari in DC years later, after I owned an event production company for 12 years, did, you know, multinational events. Met him, we got into some real estate together, and then he happened to be a chef and in the industry for a very long time. I always had, you know, just small dreams of sitting at my restaurant, drinking a glass of wine, saying hello to people as they came in. And that was like my thought of, I know good food. I feel like I could create an awesome space, but like no thinking about owning a restaurant beyond that, what went into it, all of, you know, the actual real stuff.
The business side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I met him, and after a few years of knowing each other, he asked me if I wanted to open a restaurant. And I was like, I thought he'd never ask. This is great. And so I said yes. And that's kind of how it started.
All right, Ari. That's a perfect segue to you. So how'd you get to cooking?
I've been doing it most of my, first of all, happy belated birthday. I don't know if you know this, but you two share a birthday.
Oh, we do? Oh, crazy.
Yes. And they ate.
Yeah,
That's where I did the hike.
Okay. All right.
On my birthday.
Sorry, I digress.
That's okay. Not at all.
I knew if I didn't get it in now, I would forget, and then I would hate myself for it.
Okay.
So I started in this business when I was 13. I was working as a bag boy at a local grocery store, kosher grocery store called Shaul's Kosher Market, which is no longer around. But, you know, I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. And so if I wanted to keep up with everybody else in Montgomery County, you know, I needed to have a couple dollars of my own in order to go to the movies and things like that. And so I started out bagging groceries at this local neighborhood kosher market. And one day this guy comes in and he's like, hey, he ran a staffing company for smaller kosher events, things like bar mitzvahs. Okay. And he came to the boss and he's like, look, I need someone to help me out this weekend. All of my high school kids are on summer break. And so boss pointed to me, he's like, oh, he's tiny. You know, I can't put him in the dining room. This is going to look embarrassing. So he said, look, stick him in the kitchen, put one of your kitchen guys in the dining room. It'll get you through the week. And that's that. So the rest is just history. I started in the kitchen there, and it was weekend.
They threw you to the wolves, man.
Pretty much. I mean, it wasn't real cooking there. It was like, can you cut up fruit and put it on a platter?
Right.
And can you take these deli meats, roll them up, and put them on a platter? Stick some ketchup in the middle. Maybe put some lettuce underneath it so it looks good. And, you know, that's where I got my start. And then from there, I was like, this is amazing. Imagine what we do if we could actually cook food, if we actually knew how to do things.
Now, did you grow up kosher?
Yes. So my parents still keep a kosher household to this day.
Okay.
My brother, my older brother, my sister, and my aunts and uncles all keep kosher. My in-laws all keep kosher.
Wow.
It's just me and my younger brother. I shouldn't say my younger brother on the air. My parents might be listening.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Don't send your parents to chef. Okay.
It's fine. They're not going to listen.
Okay, so, but what, as you became a chef, started cooking, you know, working for others in the industry, who were some of the, because you have a resume, who were some of the people you cooked with here?
So locally, I cooked with Chef Minoru Ogawa, formerly Signatures of Washington.
Fair
Olivia, Lily and the Cactus. And then I also worked on it for Bobby Flay's Burger Joints. I ran a couple of those for him for a couple of years.
Okay.
I ran the restaurant Ketchup in National Harbor for a while.
Wow.
Not the kitchen in there, so I'm not going to take credit for that.
Uh-huh.
But that was Ashton Kutcher's restaurant group.
I remember.
So that was quite an experience, National Harbor, back in those days.
So Ketchup opened, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but it was the first restaurant in National Harbor.
Yeah.
So they were just figuring it all out, right? I mean, you know, 10 years later, it's a totally different place.
Well, this was before Uber. It was designed with one road in, one road out. People would come for 4-day conferences and couldn't get out of the National Harbor.
Right. There was no ferry.
Yeah.
I remember the first time driving over when the Gaylord had opened and driving over like the highway. And I was like, what is that? I was like, oh my God, is that National Harbor? Like it literally was like Oz coming out of the water. Now, I mean, but it took everybody a while to get their sea legs there with good reason. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
New areas are tough. So, okay. So you were in all those places. You guys are friends during all this?
No, we didn't meet till years later.
Okay.
We've known each other for what? I guess
6
like
or 7 years.
7 years, maybe 7 years.
Okay.
So we knew each other for a year. Got into that's kind of how we connected, is over our love of business, entrepreneurship, this, that, and the other. He would say things and I was like, this guy's really smart. And so
And then she figured
I know,
out
right? Little did I know. But so that's why I was like, and I was looking to buy some real estate in DC, some investment properties, and he was doing that at the time. And so we started going to places and going to lunch. And then, you know, we would sit together at lunch and talk, you know, critique all of the food and be like, well, this needs this, and this would be cool if this had this, you know.
Are we going to say names? Are we dropping any names?
I don't even remember, honestly.
Just
like, it was just
random places
wherever.
we go.
Like, we went to a hole in the wall, like, chicken spot in Southeast DC.
Right.
And then, like, also at the time, one of Mike Isabel's restaurants, you know, so it's
you could say Mike Isabella.
Right.
Mike was a really good friend.
Right.
So, I mean, he handled himself incredibly poorly, but, you know,
These things
he's
happen.
still a person.
Right.
And, you know, we talked earlier offline, we'll get into it about cancel culture. You know, how long does that last? Right? Not that he was right at all. He was totally wrong. But you can say his name without blushing. So tell me how you guys wound up in Richmond. What was the first concept? That was Soul Taco?
That was Soul Taco, yeah.
Okay, so what is Soul Taco? How did you get from this area to Richmond?
Totally by mistake.
Okay. I mean, did you go to Sub Rosa for the croissants and we're like, ooh, maybe
No,
we should do something
no,
here?
not at all. Everything was
never
like a
been to
series of accidents.
Okay.
Yeah, we had never been to Richmond. I think, Nar, you went once with your friends in college, or shortly after college
on
for
a
like 2
day
days.
trip.
It's a good day trip.
Yeah, it was fun. And that's all I remember is having mimosas in the middle of the day, drinking a lot.
What is
not
that
driving
area
back.
called? It's not, there's like it's like a lot of vintage shops. It's
There's Carytown and
Carytown.
Chocolate
I don't know
Bar.
why I can never remember Carytown, but Carytown, there's like that, I call it Le Diplomat Light. Like there's a brasserie.
Yep, absolutely. Can is there.
Right.
Yep.
Can. Okay, great. Thanks. I'm assuming I'm just thinking you said mimosas. I'm like, I
Right.
feel like that's where she was.
No, I actually happened
place
to
across the
be
street.
at Lulu's, which is now around the corner from JewFro, and it took me years to realize. Like, I walked in one day and I was like, "This is where I had like 13 mimosas."
Oh
that
my
day.
God, that's so funny.
It was probably the 14th mimosa that you didn't get. It's
Right,
the only reason
exactly.
you can remember it.
Exactly.
And one more would have put over.
But yeah, so we were looking for a restaurant at this time. He had asked me if I wanted to open a restaurant. I said yes. We had no real concept in mind. It was just, let's find the space and see what makes sense for that area.
Okay.
It's definitely something we were looking for in DC. started looking in Adams Morgan. And then Ari, why don't you take that bit?
Yes.
I mean, it's a little bit of a sore subject for me, but it actually plays very well into the brand of JewFro and why we ended up where we are. Before Soul Taco, we had looked at the space and they were looking to sell it. It was a pizza shop of some sort. And the two owners were this guy and his girlfriend. And
this is in Adams Morgan.
In Adams Morgan.
Okay.
And he said, we want to sell the place. And he wanted to sell it to us. And so he comes back and he says, look, I have a higher bidder. I said, look, we want this space. Whatever that guy's willing to offer, we'll beat it by $5,000. I mean, this was a failed pizza shop. We weren't buying business. We were buying the space and the assets. And so that's how I know for a fact that we had the highest bid, because I said, whatever the other guy's going to offer, we'll beat it.
Okay.
And his girlfriend comes in the room and says, I won't sell to him being me, the Jew. And so...
Isn't that illegal?
Yes, 100%.
I mean, it's totally illegal. Right.
100%. And I'll say this, and I've said it before, this isn't the first time I've been discriminated against. It won't be the last time. It is unfortunate, it is tragic, but it is also part of life. And I'm sure you can both, connect with that. This has happened. It happens way more often than it should. But that was a sign that this is not a thing that we're going to pursue. We walked away from that project and decided we weren't going to move forward there.
Okay.
We continued looking for a space, and we found a listing that was listed on 2nd Street. No more detail other than it was a space, the price made sense, and it was on 2nd Street.
It's a near DC, I think, if I wasn't mistaken.
Something like that.
2nd Street. What are those
Craig?
Okay.
So
Northeast, Southeast, like
business
where?
for sale post.
Right.
And so we reached out to the guy who listed the post, and it was the landlord, and he's like, look, I don't want to put the address out because we are evicting the previous tenant. They haven't paid rent in 6 months. And I can't sustain losses anymore. So I'm talking to people. But once I find someone that we feel is serious, then we'll release the address, because just like in DC, actually more so in Richmond.
But didn't you have to pitch the concept of what you wanted to do there?
We did.
Sort of.
No, we did. We did before he gave us the lease. But we wanted to go see the space and make sure that it was something that was viable, that made sense. So Ari looks at this ad. He reaches out to the guy. And after a little bit of back and forth, he's like, well, it's in Richmond, Virginia. And we knew nothing about Richmond, Virginia. He had a friend that he worked with at Ketchup at the time, which is Trey, our now business partner.
Okay. This is Trey Owens.
Trey Owens,
Trey.
correct.
Right.
So he reached out to Trey and said, hey, I have this opportunity. Do you have a second to go take a look at this space? Trey was still in the restaurant space at that point. Do you have a second to take a look at this space and see if it makes sense for, a small concept restaurant that we're trying to build? And Trey was... at the time, miraculously, because we're both in DC and it's a completely different, geography than Richmond is. But Trey was like, oh, that's around the corner from my house, which that's, everywhere in DC is at least 20 minutes away.
But I always say, I really bother one of my girlfriends who's in Southern California. And I'm always like, oh, it's around the corner.
Right.
She's like, not everything is around the
corner.
I'm like,
but it is.
But it was actually 3 blocks away from his house.
So I want to speed up a little bit. So you get there.
Right.
And you decide, how does Soul Taco come to life?
So we get there, we like the space, we sit down with Trey, we have lunch, we go, hey Trey, we're going to open a restaurant here, do you want to be involved? And he says, yeah, that sounds great, I don't have any money. We said, that's fine, neither do we, let's make it happen.
Okay.
And so we decide to open the space, and then we're sitting there, we're at a restaurant called Pearly's, which is a Jewish deli.
The bagel place, it's good.
And we're sitting there over lunch, and we're like, what is this restaurant going to be?
Can we just talk for a second about Pearly's? Because I think it's really interesting, because it is a deli, but it's reimagined, right?
They're
sort
fantastic.
of in the Michael Zalmanov way, but
Yes.
not fine dining. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think they found a beautiful midway of presenting New York deli food with a little bit of
elevation,
chefy. They chefed it up a bit.
There are Triple D brothers. They were on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives at the same time we were with Soul Taco.
Okay, so Soul Taco gets created. You decide to do tacos, but what is it? Let's talk about what it is quickly.
So it's a Southern Latin American fusion with a California twist, in that we're using a lot of fresh, vibrant colors, pickled things, all of that.
So, for example, we're doing a braised oxtail al pastor instead of doing it the classic way. We do a root beer braise on the oxtail, which is an ode to Chef John White, who passed the year we opened. He was the executive chef at Ketchup when Trey and I both worked there. He did a root beer glazed something or other. And so we have root beer glazed oxtail al pastor, topped with a pineapple and roasted jalapeno salsa,
Yum.
chicharrones, and agave hot sauce. We do a buttermilk battered fried chicken taco with chipotle barbecue sauce, agave hot sauce, pickled red onions, and fresh avocado. We do a shrimp po' boy taco.
Okay, so you're really playing with the
like
concept.
Yep.
So it's the taco is the
Vessel.
Is the vessel, exactly. But it's really allowing you to sort of play with your food and do non-traditional things.
But at the same time, each piece is related to the traditional version. So the al pastor is done in a very similar style that a classic al pastor would be done.
Right.
Except we're doing it with root beer, with oxtail.
Right.
You know, same thing with the chicken tinga jambalaya. Is a play on jambalaya, but it's also a play on a classic chicken tinga. Mm-hmm. And so we're using the elements of both cuisines like a true fusion should.
Right.
And as you said, the taco is the vessel. Our t-shirts all say, what is it? A taco without a soul is just a sandwich.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you.
Very cute.
Trey came up
No,
with
I
that.
came up
You
with
came
She's
up
like,
with
it's
that?
mine.
That's mine.
It is mine. It is mine. Okay, so let's jump forward. So where did JewFro come from? Because it was a pop-up originally,
Right.
but you guys have a reason for the pop-up. So
Right.
what happened?
So Soul Taco happened, pandemic happened. We made
How long were you open before the pandemic took over?
we have one location. We were open for a year. Guy Fieri and his team called us and they were like, we're going to put you guys on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. The weekend that we filmed the show was the weekend that we opened the second location, which was crazy. But we ended up...
That's when it rains.
Right, exactly. Well, there was a hurricane, so they had to
Okay.
move the filming. Right, exactly.
Right, it did rain in Florida.
So that happened, and then that was 2019 September, and then March 2020 the world shuts down.
Right.
We are operating just like everybody else, however we can, to goes, whatever. We ended up working at this nightclub, Cabana, which could no longer operate as a nightclub. It's one of the rooftops in Richmond. One of the owners said, hey, let's put a Soul Taco up here. Let's, we can do outdoor dining.
Right, outdoor dining.
Exactly. More loungy because you can't make the money on
So we
bottle
did
service
that.
and stuff.
They ended up having another space in that same area downstairs. And he was like, this space is dying. There's nothing, it's doing nothing. Do you guys want to do something with it? And we were like, sure. At this point, they had just opened, indoor dining had just started. Okay. So in our heads, we were like, we have to do something. We weren't super keen on the idea, but we were like, to survive, we need something.
Sure.
So we decided, it was during the holidays, beginning of November, late October, if I'm not mistaken. We decided to do a 2-month holiday pop-up. We called it a woke holiday story. It was...
God, you guys were ahead of the game.
Right.
Go ahead.
It was everything all in one.
Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa fusion.
Pulling from all of our cultures and our traditions. Our servers wore onesies. Our bartenders wore ugly Christmas sweaters. But it was like a fine dining experience. You would sit at the table and throw like cotton balls at each other and have a snowball fight. We had to build your own gingerbread house. Yeah. It was a whole thing. Our thought was, if people are going to come out during COVID, it really has to be something. Oh, right. So, we packed the place every single day. It was crazy.
You didn't pack it. You
we packed it 6 feet apart.
Right, exactly.
You filled it
we filled
correctly.
it based on what we could do and what
Let's use
made
our words
sense. Yes.
wisely. Okay, go ahead.
The statute of limitations passed.
We were featured in Southern Living magazine with that concept. And then we were one day kind of slowing down that concept. And then we're just kind of celebrating the success of that and trying to figure out, okay, now what's next? COVID is still happening. Limitations are being, are easing.
Right, it was back, I know, but it was like a roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did we get to this concept?
So then that's when we started talking, and then Ari, you can take it from here.
All right, Ari, take it from here.
JewFro was actually the original concept before Jingle Bell, but it wasn't something that we felt we could execute. It all started with it started as a conversation on the political climate and the civil rights protests that were happening in this country.
Right, because shit was going down.
Yeah.
Other than just the pandemic, the George Floyd marches, Black Lives Matter, there was so much.
The election.
The vitriol was...
it was a very polarizing time.
It still is.
But,
yep.
And so it started this conversation where the three of us were talking about Nick Cannon had made some anti-Semitic remarks very similar to what Kanye West said recently that got him canceled. And the conversation started with they were going to remove him from Masked Singer, fire him from NBC, cancel Wild 'N Out and all of his other shows.
Which, I mean, not to interrupt you, but I am interrupting you. Taking him out is not the answer to me, because how does he learn from that?
Right.
All he does is get angrier, you know, or thinks, well, I guess what I think about Jews is correct. Or any marginalized group, right? Like, if you get canceled, it's a moment for education.
I'm glad you said that, because that was exactly the stance and standpoint that we took, which is, in our collective opinion, the three of us, one of the biggest issues facing American society today is cancel culture. We can't have difficult conversations about topics that are, what's the word I'm looking for? Risque, let's go with.
Okay.
If we can't have these conversations, then we can't move forward as a society. You have to be willing to allow the other side to speak in order to reach and educate and relearn some of the things that need to be re-educated.
Well, and perspective is everything, right? Everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a different upbringing and background, which leads them to be who they are. And if we stop, listen, and understand one another, we're able to maybe understand where somebody else is coming from a little bit better, even though we did not live in their shoes.
Right. Understanding others' experiences is very important. So, okay, so you're at this moment.
Right, and so one of the biggest things we keep seeing on Facebook is, if you're voting for this candidate, unfriend me now. If you're voting for this candidate, blocked. And so it's further reinforcing this idea.
That's why I'm not on Facebook. Go ahead.
This is reinforcing this idea to us that cancel culture is really shutting things down. And so we started with this idea. Trey pitched the idea of, why don't we do something that pays homage to my history and his. And so the idea started with Jewish soul food. And I was like, look, I don't really want to do soul food again. We have soul taco. We can do more than that. So we started the conversation about, well, we can trace Trey's family back to the slave ships, but no further. And so we don't know where in Africa his family is actually from.
Okay.
And so it kind of opens up the idea that we can take this culinary journey through the entire continent. And as we start doing some of the research into some of these things, we start looking at, other than Ethiopian food, there's not much large-scale representation of African food and flavors in the U.S. culinary market. And the same goes for Jewish food. Outside of kosher delis, there's not much of a large-scale representation of Jewish food and culturally Jewish dishes.
Both of those, you know, Jewish food or from the African continent, I mean, that is a massive undertaking, because you have Ashkenazi, you have Sephardic. I mean, there's so many ways the way I define Jewish food, I didn't grow up in a kosher household. So what I consider Jewish food may be so totally different than what you consider Jewish food. And then for people, you know, who are Black or of African-American descent, what their version is of the food is so different depending on the regions.
Absolutely.
So how did you go about, in your conversations, deciding your initial menu and how you wanted the conversation to go? Because you had a point. You weren't just talking about it, and you weren't just putting it on the plate. You wanted a culinary conversation,
Absolutely.
Right? So how did the three of you talk about it, and then you execute it on the plate and you help execute the overall vision?
So I think we started with what's familiar, right?
Okay.
Which, as many people do. So Ari grew up in an Ashkenazi household. He spent some time in Israel. I'm Armenian, from Middle Eastern descent. So anything North African, foods that are eaten in Israel, foods that are eaten in the Middle East are all that's home to me, you know?
Sure.
And then Trey had some of his own, West African food knowledge. He had a lot of food knowledge in Nigerian cuisine. So that's kind of where we started.
Okay.
And then there were weeks and months of research, going to all of the restaurants that we could possibly go to, talking to any chefs that had, in Richmond, there are a few chefs that have this background, and, just talking to people and kind of trying to see, what the market wants to see, but also what will pay homage best to both of these very, very large cultures, if you can even call them that, because
Yes.
there's a huge continent of Africa, and then, you know, Jews are everywhere all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely a task. And then we kind of, I think mainly though, like we started where Ari felt comfortable because he's cooking day in and day out. And it was like, oh, I love kugel. I want to do something with a kugel. And then it was just like, okay, let's get online. Let's research. Let's talk to people. Let's see what makes sense. And
But
went
so
from there.
For the menu, did you take a kugel and fuse it?
Yes.
Okay.
So, all right. So jumping off of where Nar left off. So the first thing we did was we had just, we were wrapping up the Jingle Bell pop-up. And so we took the sous chef and the executive sous chef and the sous chef from that. And we said, look, this is the direction we want to go in for the next pop-up. You guys want to stay on the team? And they were like, absolutely. This sounds amazing.
Great.
Our sous chef, executive sous chef at the time, a gentleman named Philip Zimmer, also Jewish. Not much connection to his religion or any of the foods, but was really excited to get involved in rediscovering his own heritage and join us with that. And so the project was everyone needs to pitch. You have 1 week, everyone needs to pitch 2 apps, 2 entrees, 2 desserts, 2 sandwiches, 2 sides, right? And then we're going to compile a list, and then we'll talk it through and figure out what dishes and what inspires what and how we're going to make this work. And so this 2 4-hour phone calls later, we had so many dishes that we couldn't cut enough. We decided to run it as a small plates concept to start because we couldn't cut out any of the dishes that we loved so much.
So what were some of the big dishes initially that were surprising, that you were like, oh, that's such a good idea?
There was the lamb shank tagine with the tzimmus couscous. That one was really good. We had the potato.
For people who don't know what tzimmus is, can you explain it?
Tzimmus is like a sweet, I don't want to call it a salad because it's warm.
Well, it's kind of stewed fruit.
Stewed fruit, beets, raisins, currants, sweet potatoes, red wine, cinnamon, bunch of winter spices. And so we mixed that in with the couscous and we served that alongside lamb shank that we had cooked in a tagine style, which kind of brought a lot of the same elements that would be in a classic Moroccan tagine. What are the other ones? We did the gefilte fish crudo, which we were like, we have to reimagine what gefilte fish is.
So because, I mean, unless you're brought up with gefilte fish, I mean, to me, gefilte fish is only a conduit for the horseradish. Like, that is the only reason why I ate it, because I want as much horseradish, spicy horseradish as possible. But like, my kid, I mean, we didn't have a choice to eat it growing up. I mean, it was Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. You had to eat it. And like none of my kids eat it. It's
that chopped liver. We did a foie gras chopped liver with manischewitz and peri-peri jam.
But it's interesting because I feel like gefilte fish is going to be one of those dishes that dies. I just don't feel like the youngins,
because they're not taking to it. That's why we had to reimagine it.
So how did you reimagine it?
So we did a sklug oil, which is like an Israeli hot herb oil.
Okay.
So we used sklug. We made a sklug oil. And then we did a halibut crudo with pickled carrots, horseradish foam, and roasted beets.
Right, because it's whitefish.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So it's a white fish served with the horseradish and beet sauce. We call it crane. And those sweet stewed carrots. And so we went with pickled carrots, the sklug oil, a little bit of lemon juice, and a touch of salt. We tossed the halibut in that. And then as we plate it, it gets a sprinkle of roasted beets and a horseradish foam. And so that gives us all the flavor profiles that are in a gefilte fish.
Fascinating.
But done in a modern and approachable manner. The plate itself is beautiful. It's a sprinkle of bull's blood on top. And it's just this, just a really pretty plate. And it's crudo. Who doesn't love crudo? Crudo is super in right now.
Everybody loves crudo. Right.
Exactly. And if you don't love crudo, you like tartare.
Yes, right. It's the same thing.
Right.
So you have all these great ideas. And how did you go about presenting it? What was the narrative that you were sharing with everyone? Because listen, JewFro, people hear JewFro, you're going to get some eyebrows raised, right? So how did you go about sharing the narrative of what you were doing?
So that's actually where we started with the name. After we decided that we wanted to do this concept, we wanted a name that was a little bit on the edge. And so the idea of conversation over cancellation, and the idea that if you hear this name, you might be offended, and if you're going to be quick to judge and not be willing to have a conversation, then this is dead in the water.
Okay, so it's not for you.
Right. But if you're willing to push the boundaries and perhaps be open to something that you may have found offensive, but if you're willing to have the conversation and see that it in fact comes from a place of love, then we can move forward and we can talk about how we are more alike than we are dissimilar, and we can show these similarities and the fusion of the food and the flavors and everything that we put together. But we wanted to start with a name that was like right on the edge there and start the conversation right at the very beginning when you first walk up to the restaurant and go, should I be offended?
And that's where the conversation actually started. People would sit down and be like, JewFro, like, and, you know, what is this?
For those of us who are Jewish, I mean, a JewFro is, you know, a guy who has really tight curly hair.
Correct.
Because it looks like an afro. And I don't know if that's offensive or not. It never even occurred to me.
Right.
But I guess it...
But it sounds like a thing.
It sounds offensive.
Right.
I mean, it's not a word I would use.
Yeah, I've heard it. Which is why when it was pitched to me and Trey came up with the name, he was like, we have to call it JewFro. It's Jewish African. I was like, hell no.
Right.
Not an option.
Right.
I was like, I love this.
Right.
If you can pitch a better name, I'll entertain it. But
so what was the initial feedback?
We actually had really great feedback. There was one person I remember who called because it was a pop-up. We had a Google Voice number, so it was connected to all of our cell phones. And I remember being in my apartment. I picked up the phone, and she was like, "Is this JewFro?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I think your name is disgusting, and I wished you all the best, and I hope you succeed, but I think your name is very disgusting." And that was the one time ever anybody has said anything negative to me personally. Everybody else is like, "Oh my God, that's so cool."
What I really want to know, I really want to know what offended her. Was it the Jew or the
It was
fro?
well, I don't know. She was Jewish. I know that.
Okay.
But that's all I know. It was a very short conversation, and I was like so taken aback. I didn't have words. I was like, "I'm so sorry," and that was it.
Okay, so you do this pop up. It's received well.
Yes.
And so, what's the evolution?
As we say in Yiddish, it was bashert. We we decided at the end of each pop-up we were going to take the staff out for a big party because it's real difficult with pop-ups.
They're fast and furious.
Fast and furious, but you lose team members, but you don't have enough time to train and replace because it closes in a month. So by the time you get to the last day, you're running on a skeleton crew because, you know, everybody has dropped off, but we can't replace them. We can't hire new people. So it's this minimal crew that we're working with. We decided to take them out to this nightclub in Shockoe Bottom area of Richmond.
Okay.
And after that, we decided we're going to go out to ice cream. It's this ice cream shop around the corner. We walk past the space on the corner, big, beautiful space, and it's got a for lease sign. And we've never seen this for lease sign before. We're in the area constantly, never noticed it. And we go, wait, and we all stop and we stare in the windows and we're like, this is beautiful. We have to have this. And so I called the landlord the next day. We set up a time to go see it. Turns out it's the oldest commercial space in Richmond that is still active. The previous tenants had leased the space, done like most of the renovations, and then COVID hit and they walked away. And so the space was like
what a gift from the gods.
This beautiful, beautiful building, hardwood, original hardwoods, original loft ceilings, raised. I mean, it was still is absolutely stunning. And all it needed was lipstick and rouge. Okay. And so we negotiated the space with him. And then Nar went to work with her former business partner, Sugar Taylor, who did the design work in there. And
oh my God, I love that.
I'll let you take it over from there.
She's the most, the talented designer in the
right.
DC area.
Right. So since in a pop-up, you're really not executing the visual other than the food. So how did you want to create that space?
So, oops. Let me not break everything. So in the pop-up, we created some of the visual in that, like, anytime we created a pop-up, we created like a brand behind it, regardless of, you know, how big and expansive it was and how crazy we went with it. But we had an idea of, we wanted this to be like a modern 70s theme. Okay. And so I shared that with my previous business partner. She's Black. She had actually just come from living in Tanzania for through COVID, just because it was something that she wanted to do. Took her family there and lived there for almost a year. So she was like, I'm obsessed with this project already. And so she just created all of the visuals and the logo work and all of that for us. And so the restaurant has like a modern 70s vibe with like light pink, as Ari likes to call it, puke green.
That's what Sugar called it. Right. I was sitting on that.
But it's that avocado green.
Exactly.
I know what it looks like.
Avocado green.
I mean, everybody had that in their house in the 70s.
Exactly. And yeah, that's kind of where we started with it. And then we took it a little bit further in, you know, all the renovations that we did. We got this like beautiful custom carpet that had some African symbols as well as the Star of David. And that goes up our spiral staircase.
How many seats?
65 right now.
Okay.
For another week or so.
Right.
Oh, right.
About to be 85.
We did just procure some new tables.
Yeah, so we're on 2 levels. It's just this beautiful, as Ari said, space in this oldest commercial building in Richmond. A kitchen way too small for what we're doing in there, but we're making it work.
Well, so are we still doing small plates?
We're not.
We immediately
scrapped that.
We did that through the pop-up, and then as soon as we decided to make it a full-time thing, we immediately scrapped that.
That makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
Because I'm done.
Well, the main thing with the small
Personally,
plates, the main thing with the small plates was if it's only going to be around for 2 months, we want to get all these ideas out.
Right.
But if we're going to be
here forever, it's a way to R&D it. Right.
If we're going to be here forever, then we can make this an entree, and then in 2 months put the other thing on. It doesn't have to be this. We're going to have a chance to do more things. It doesn't have to be one menu, and then we're out of here.
Right. So now, as you built out your menu, so how long have you guys been open now?
Almost, a year and a half.
Let's talk a little bit about the beverage program, because again, you're including all of this in your beverage program. So what does that look like? What does the wine list look like? How are the cocktails affected? What does the beer program look like? How did you guys go about being intentional with that?
So we had a gentleman by the name of Paul Halstead who came from, was it Fiola or Fiola Mare?
Yeah, I know Paul.
Really?
Oh, you know Paul?
Yes.
Oh my God, Paul's amazing. He was our general manager through the pop-ups and through the first 7 or 8 months of the brick and mortar opening. And he developed our cocktail program and put the framework in.
Okay.
And he designed all the cocktails that were on the menu. There have been a few additions since his departure, but he designed all the cocktails, and then we worked together to add Jewish and African flair to them. So, for example,
No. I wanted to hear. I was like, what are the spirits, or what are the flavors that ring true to you, whether it's from the Jewish diaspora or the African?
Well, not from Paul's cocktail menu, but we just added a cocktail that has a za'atar-infused vodka. It's basically our take on a martini.
Sure.
And it has Lebanese stuffed olives, and what else? There's an olive oil foam on that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, olive oil foam.
Sorry, I don't drink much, so
that's okay.
So I don't know.
No, I got the drinker over here.
Yep,
that's okay.
me.
We're going out for mimosas later. We're all good.
But yeah, so we're imparting all of those elements into what would be a classic martini, but then JewFroing it up, if you will. We have the Elijah's Ascension, which is the only thing on the menu that I actually drink, and it started out as a schmaltz washed bourbon.
Okay.
Using Elijah,
schmaltz, for those of you who don't know, is chicken fat,
which we eventually changed to ghee or clarified butter because
that makes sense.
Vegetarian.
We just found that people, even though it clearly said it was washed in chicken fat, most people don't look for those things on a cocktail menu. They just assume cocktails are vegetarian.
I think I have to be honest with you. Since I just talked about that Wagyu washed cocktail, I think as that drips down, more people will understand what the fat does to change the clarity of the cocktail.
Absolutely.
So it's a learning curve.
But we didn't want to, as someone who grew up in a kosher household, there were many times where, there were stories of kosher places that were sneaking in non-kosher meats and things like that, and they would lose their certifications. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy that's sneaking in meat to what people assume is a vegetarian option.
So smart. And
so we decided to switch it to ghee. And so we fat washed the Elijah Craig. And then we make a cigar syrup using cigar tobacco. We basically cook it down 3 or 4 times to kill out all the carcinogens. And then we steep the flavor of the cigar and make a simple syrup out of that. So you get
that sounds delicious.
That flavor. And then we use a cherry tobacco. We use a fog hat, a little smoking cap. And we use a fog hat to smoke it table side, infusing the cherry tobacco flavor into it. And so the idea was, it's kind of a running play on Elijah the prophet, who was one of the only personas in the Bible who didn't die and said he was ascended to heaven. Right. So we've taken Elijah Craig and ascended it to a significantly higher level.
I love that.
That was kind of our play on words with the name. And most of the cocktails have a play on words or an ode to an old either Jewish or African legend, with the exception of the Flyaway, which is obviously an ode to Lenny Kravitz.
Right. Which makes all the sense in the world.
Right. It's JewFro. We have to.
And what about wines and beers?
Beers, we keep local.
Okay.
Richmond loves their beer scene, and they love their
With
local
good
beers,
reason.
and they have
I totally get
beautiful
that.
breweries with great beers. So we keep those local. Wines, I have dabbled in a lot of the South African wines. There is this amazing South African winemaker. The wine is called Aslina. She's the first Black South African, the first Black woman winemaker.
Oh, cool.
Vineyard in Richmond in South Africa. And her wines are delicious. So we started there and then kind of are dabbling in a lot of South African wines. I've tried to bring in some of the Jewish wines, have not had the best
You mean
luck.
importing them or selling them?
Not importing them.
Enjoying them.
Right.
Sorry, I shouldn't say
Okay,
that.
so I
Haven't
will,
yet found the
off
best.
air, I will tell you about somebody.
Okay.
There are some amazing Israeli
Sure.
wines, especially from the Golan Heights. They're incredible.
I have not, the distributors that I'm currently working with have had trouble getting me things that I enjoy.
Okay.
And so that's where I am.
I'm going to put you in touch with somebody off air
Sounds
who is like an ambassador for the Golan Heights wines specifically. Because I was just there and they're pretty fabulous. We had amazing wines. Anyway, all right. So you've got this whole program up and running now. And are you guys, is there programming? Like, is it just food? Are you looking to...
It's an experience.
You're right, but are you looking to bring people to the table to discuss it more? Do people have questions, not just about the food, but about what you're doing? And how do you train your staff to be able to handle sort of the heavy content?
All the time. A lot of times we get hey, chef, do you have a minute? This table wants to ask you some questions I'm not prepared to answer.
Okay.
So we do get a lot of that. And then on the bottom of the menu, we put a little glossary that explains the history of and the tradition of a lot of the dishes that, and one of the things that I can't stand, especially when I go to restaurants that are not classic American, classic French food. I don't want to sit there and Google what that dish is.
Right.
And so we put a little glossary on the bottom of the menu that will rotate with the dishes so it can explain to you when you're getting things like zigni, like a zigni brisket, that it is a take on the Eritrean zigni, almost stew that's served traditionally with injera. And so
this is all an Ethiopian dish,
Right.
just for people who don't know.
It's Eritrean.
Eritrean, yes.
And so we are using the same style of cooking, the same methods, and the same flavors to make our brisket, which we use as a topping on the Schlickas, which is basically a Hungarian, I guess the term people would be familiar with is gnocchi.
Right.
It's a Hungarian potato dumpling pasta-esque thing that is rolled in like a sweet breadcrumb. So we bake fresh challahs every day. And we take the day-old challahs, we grind them up and make the breadcrumbs, which we season with a little extra cumin and coriander. And then we roll we'll call it the gnocchi, but the Schlickas in the breadcrumbs, and then we cook it in the classic gnocchi style. And then we serve it with a Berberi and Durban cream sauce. So
Wow.
Berberi is an Ethiopian hot seasoning blend. Durban is like a South African curry spice. And then we top that with our zigni brisket. And of course, as everyone knows, brisket is like among the most quintessential Jewish dishes. And then the zigni, of course, bringing in the African flavors into it as well.
Right.
Doing it in the same flavor profiles.
Although the Irish might fight you on the brisket.
Right.
But that's okay.
It's a different style, and
It's
so
a
are the
different-
Texans, but it's a different
Right,
style.
right.
We do it differently.
Exactly.
We all have it. We just do it differently.
Right, exactly. Okay, so what's next?
Next is anything we can possibly do. To be quite honest, we're in a place where we're super excited about the brand, super excited about the concept. Thankfully, things have been, going in an upward trajectory, and we've been getting a lot of attention, and people have been really excited alongside of us.
Right,
So,
you guys were recently in Bon Appetit, which is
Right.
very exciting.
Yes,
Or
Bon Appetit
Food and
and
Wine,
Forbes and
Forbes.
Food and Wine. So that's been really fun. And with that comes the opportunity, right?
Right.
With that comes the opportunity to, tell the story more and educate more, which is basically why we started. And so through that, we are doing a series of dinners and collaborations and conversations. So we just started this. Our first one was purely fun, but it was something that we thought about doing. We called it Dinner and a Movie. So we basically put up a projector in the dining room, had a very small 35-seat intimate experience where we played, where we showed Chef the movie, and we basically cooked alongside the movie and whatever it was. Yeah, so whatever it was
everything that they served in the movie in the time that they ate it in the movie to create a more immersive experience. Right. But the kicker was we didn't tell anybody what we were doing. We just said, limited seats available, expect to spend 2.5 hours here. And
there will be a movie.
There will be a movie, and we sold
How many
out
people?
in like 24 hours.
Oh, I have no doubt.
We only had like 35 seats because, you know, it's fit in.
Yeah.
Well, not only, but that shows that people trust you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that
And
trust
that was
between the
it.
restaurateur/chef and the diner is so pertinent to being successful.
Absolutely.
You know?
Well, that was, we decided on this one, we were going to allow people to send dietary restrictions because we didn't release a menu or tell them what we were doing until the movie hit play and no one knew what it was.
Oh my God,
and
so
we made
fun.
like 8 versions of every dish we served. There was a gluten-free one, a dairy one, a vegan one, and every single thing. Oh my God. 1 portion worth of vegan, 1 portion worth of dairy-free. Demi-glace is absolutely absurd.
And what are some of the other ones that you're going to be doing?
Next one, we're doing a collaboration with another local restaurant. She is Italian from South Florida. And like in her words, I grew up with literally only Jews and I want to eat Jewish food all day, every day. So we're doing like a Jewish-Italian collaboration with a restaurant called Sprezza Cucina. And then we have a Jewish reggae band coming into the restaurant.
Right.
And the one that we're most excited about coming up next is our AI dinner. So we're using artificial intelligence to kind of help guide what they would say a Jewish African fusion would be. So we're going to let it dictate the menu. Yeah.
I love it.
After that, we're working on what I'm calling my apprentice dinner, but we're bringing Chef Minoru Ogawa, who is the one who trained me how to cook. And he is from Côte d'Ivoire, so he fits the brand perfectly well. We're going to bring him in, hopefully, we're still working on details with him, to bring him in to take over the kitchen for a night and do, you know, if you like my food, just wait till you see the guy who taught me how to cook. He's even better.
God, I love it. What's the date of that one? Do we know?
Unclear yet. Not yet.
Okay, TBD.
All
right. So on that note, because we do have to wrap up, tell everybody, please, where they can find you online, where they can find you on Instagram, so people can stay up to date. I mean, I have to say to anybody who has not been to Richmond recently, the food scene down there is really vibrant. There's so much going on there, JewFro being an integral part of it. So tell everybody, please, where they can find you.
Okay, so our website is www.jewfrorestaurant.com, Instagram, Facebook, JewFro Restaurant. We are constantly posting, constantly telling people what's new, so go and check it out.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you both. All right, stay here one sec. Let me just wrap up. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Everything you heard here, you can find on the listoryouwantit.com. Also at NYCCI, NELLIS, Instagram, Facebook, even though I said I wasn't on Facebook, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And don't forget, this show is now on YouTube. So please subscribe. If you have questions, either reach out to me on any of the social media platforms. I can totally connect with the 2 lovely people here, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer your questions. Also, if you need restaurant suggestions or you want to take a road trip to Richmond, I can really help you out. So thank you all for joining me today. Thank you both for such a great conversation. Everybody have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.